What's up, everybody? This may look like some sort of emergency live show just because we got the news about Josh Rosen, but I promise you it's not that. That we definitely had this planned out. I promise you we're not overreacting to the news that Josh Rosen just got brought to the roster. But I'm here with some guests. To my nope, never do it right. Akash from Fourth
It's
and
hard,
Nine,
man.
who's on vacation right now to my left and actually doing us a solid by doing this, man. Akash, man, we appreciate you, bro. What's up?
What's up, man? I appreciate you for having me on, and it's a good group of guests here, so I'm glad to come on and talk. I know the team's not very good right now, but there's always something to talk about.
For sure. And to the corner right under Akash, Vish is here with us too. Vish, what's up, bro?
What's up, man? How are you? It's
Super excited
really
about
nice
this.
to be on.
Super excited about this Rosen news. You came in here pumping your fists and everything, man. And underneath me, you know who that is. Javi, what's up, buddy?
Oh, just get me to the off season. I don't give a shit anymore, bro. Like, just get me to the off season.
That's
I'm so done with this year.
I think that's that's where we're at right now with this. So yeah, look, obviously the news that just came down, right? Josh Rosen, on the Bucks practice squad, elevated to the active roster right in time for a revenge game on Saturday. Like, if you wrote this in a movie, you would say it was really stupid because that could never happen. But here we are, right? So seriously, guys, like, I think what people have, misconceived, or the thing that people are taking wrong about what I'm saying about Rosen is what I'm saying is that you need to kick the tires on the unknown. Not in any way am I telling you that Josh Rosen's a savior. I'm just telling you that you need to kick the tires. And I was upset that when I hear Josh Johnson be brought in, I'm like, man, why is Josh Rosen not brought in at this point? Like, why wouldn't you take a chance on somebody like that? So interested to get your thoughts. I'll go around. Akash, you could kick us off, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, Vish hit it on the head before we started. It's like the backup quarterbacks behind Jimmy Garoppolo don't have very much talent, whether it's Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard. And constantly the excuse that's used is that they kind of know Shanahan's playbook. And so my question's always been, why didn't they bring Josh Rosen in earlier? He's been on Tampa Bay's practice squad practically, I think, the entire season. And why didn't they just sign him earlier instead of Josh Johnson? And they waited until basically they were in an emergency situation to bring him in. And clearly, Kyle mentioned this during his presser. When your team goes to the postseason, there's a playoff bonus, and Josh Rosen would have gotten that if Tampa Bay had made it. So he's foregoing that bonus to come to San Francisco for an opportunity to play. He's obviously got talent. He was a first-round pick. He played that one season in Arizona. So I'm excited to see what he has to do. Obviously, he's coming in here. He has zero idea of the playbook or anything like that, but he just has talent. I'd rather watch him than CJ Beathard because I know what we're going to get out of CJ Beathard. So just play him, even if he doesn't know everything. Just gives us something to watch these next two games and something to evaluate moving forward into 2021, just to see if you have something. Because I don't know. I don't think you can bring back Mullins. I have no idea what's going on with his health, if he has Tommy John surgery or whatever. CJ Beathard, I'm not super high on. Josh Rosen, you may have some upside. So just let him play these two games, see what you got, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. Vish, anything to add there too, bro?
Yeah, so when I look at Josh Rosen, right, I liked him a lot before the draft. I was wrong on him. He's not that good. He hasn't been that good. But I think if there's one offense he could work in, it's this one. He's a really natural thrower of the ball, and that doesn't go away. Like, he used to throw perfect spirals every time he threw it at UCLA, and he threw a very nice deep ball. It was like a pillow at UCLA, and he threw the deep post as good as anybody I've seen in college in a while. So if there's an offense he's going to work in, it's this one. I've always wondered why they didn't just kick the tires with someone like him that has talent. Like, okay, Jimmy was kind of entrenched as the starter. Unfortunately, he keeps getting hurt, so Nick Mullins has to play. But I think they assumed Nick Mullins was kind of the backup, just given how they've addressed Mullins and CJ this year. Why not bring in someone with talent to compete with CJ and have someone just like Josh Rosen, who is talented enough to be a top 10 overall pick, a very highly recruited player out of high school that possibly could be something of a backup player if he stayed in your system for a couple of years. I never understood that. I never understood why CJ Beathard was handed the number 3 quarterback job the last 3 years without any sort of competition. I mean, they brought in Brock Rutter, who went to my high school and went to college 20 minutes away from where I live. And, I don't think he's as talented as a Josh Rosen or a Jameis Winston or those other guys that have been signed for cheap. But I think it's cool that they get him. Hopefully he doesn't just get cut when Josh Johnson comes off the COVID list. Maybe if he gets cut, then there's a lot of things wrong with him that we don't know about. But if he doesn't get cut, then hopefully they develop him and they have a nice, talented backup player.
Right. And I see a comment in here. Why was there even 3 quarterbacks? It's COVID. You have to have as many as you can. This would have never flown last year. We would have never even had the discussion if it wasn't, the landscape.
Yep.
So, Javi, anything to add there, bro? Javi, are you there? All right. Javi's having some issues, I think.
I mean,
there you go. There we go.
I'm here.
Yeah.
No, I'm here.
Good.
Yeah, and I don't know, my internet's acting up. But no, I think Vish hit it on the head. I don't know how you know who Nick Mullins is. You know who CJ Beathard is. You saw them play in 2018. You saw them play in 2017. Like, you should have been addressed this backup quarterback room a long time ago. I was one of those fans who were like, no, it's fine. Jimmy Garoppolo is what it is. But they should have, instead of taking a punter, they should have looked at a Ryan Finley or someone like that. So that's just where I'm at with it. It's just a little too late for a backup.
He scored that. Ryan Finley scored yesterday twice.
He did, and it was with his wheels. So this fan base is looking for a mobile quarterback. Take that, Ryan Finley's out here. The one thing that I wanted to add on with Rosen, it's like, I don't know if Rosen is good, like how Vish says, right? But here's the thing, right? First year, Vance Joseph, not an offensive mind. Mike McCoy gets fired halfway through the year, who was awful. Everybody was picking him apart because he just wanted to run the ball up the middle 10 times in a row. And then Byron Leftwich was his OC for a little while in Arizona, right? We all know what happens there. Cliff comes, Kyler comes. You got to move on to Miami. Miami's thin at roster. He plays a few games. Tua comes into the fold because of how they're losing. So I'm not telling you that I think that he's like some, magical end-all, be-all. I'm just saying that why wouldn't you take a shot on something like this, knowing that circumstances and a little bit of bad play and coaching have to do with why he is where he is, even though where he got drafted, So that's really where I was at with it, honestly.
I know the biggest question coming in, I think, was his like work ethic and just kind of his like background and kind of where he's from. And maybe he thought he was kind of too cool for the group or whatever. And so maybe now that he's been on a couple different teams, he's been on a practice squad, maybe he's been a little humbled and he comes in with a little better mindset, especially knowing what Kyle Shanahan is capable of offensively. So the only time will tell.
Yeah. So I mean, and wait, one more thing, Vish. 2 games left. Who cares at this point? Really, who cares at this point? I think that at this point, even the staunchest 49er supporter would say, we lose these next 2 games. Like, just move on. Like, you just want to get to that draft spot. So why wouldn't you even check on that? Go ahead, Vish. I'm sorry.
Right. So what I was going to say was, with him, the thing was, right, how much does he care about football? Right. I think that was the big question. And when he left Arizona, I remember reading something that someone reported saying that already then he was talking about, going back to UCLA and furthering his degree in astrophysics or something of that sort. So he was a big academic. Regarding that, I will say this, for a guy that's from his background and has the money that he has had with his family and the education he's had from UCLA, the fact that he took a practice squad job in Tampa Bay has to tell you that he has to be some sort of committed in football. Otherwise, why would he take such a job when he could probably make more money getting his degree and doing stuff like that? So I think that, and the fact that he's come to San Francisco, I think this is the only offense, given his lack of mobility and inability to move, that he could function in. So I think that this is his last shot, and hopefully he seizes it.
Yep. Javi?
Yeah, no, Vish hit it on the head again. It's just, at this point in the season, it is what it is for the 49ers. They're out of the playoffs. You need warm bodies at this point. Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to play this season. There's a lot of reasons for that, whether you want to believe what you want to believe with that situation. So yeah, I mean, Josh he's a smart kid. He knows who's going to help utilize his strengths, and it's going to be Kyle Shanahan. And I kind of want to see it. Let him play. But if he wins us a game, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So here's the problem, right? Is that Rosen comes in here, he plays Saturday, he gets his revenge on them, and then he beats Seattle, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now you've pushed yourself down. But I think that the portion of the fan base has been a little bit rabid. Will take into the offseason. We need to stick with Rosen even after 2 games. So
the likelihood he wins one of these 2 games is extremely low. Did you listen to Kyle Shanahan read the injury report? It went on for like 5 minutes. Like, they've got dudes left and right that are hurt. I think if anybody's like 50-50, they'll probably lean on, the side of caution and not play them. So Josh Rosen, even if he plays, he's going to work with like a barren roster. So I can't see him succeeding. So we'll see.
There goes Akash again with the damn logic. I'm trying to push narratives here. I don't need your logic and I don't need your thought process. I'm just kidding, man. All right, look. So, with that being said, yeah, it is true, right? We have to turn the page on this season. So, real quick, because, this season's been super long. We could probably talk for about an hour each about our individual thoughts on this season, right? Wrap this season up for me real quick. I'll start with you, Javi. let's start the other way. Wrap the season up for me, man. Like just real quick, like a few minutes, just what this season was, what it should be, and what 49er fans should take from it.
The season was a disaster, and it started in week 1. And all the narratives about Jimmy Garoppolo started. All the narratives that were in the offseason showed up in week 1 immediately. Can't push the ball down the field. Doesn't throw the ball outside the hash marks. There's a lot of issues there. And then of course the injuries just betrayed this team all the way through. So season was over week 2. It was just a disaster all the way. To me, this is a gap year. This is a year to reset. This is a year to look back and be like, okay, Kyle, learn from your mistakes. Make sure you're evaluating quarterbacks in this draft and every draft, because you can never have enough quarterbacks. Maybe stop playing money ball with your running back room. Go get a guy who's just a little bit more durable. I love Raheem Mostert. I think he's great, but he's a guy that's going to be a guy that you need, for 15 carries a game. You can't rely on him for 25 to 30 a game. So go get yourself another running back. This was a learning year for the 49ers. And Kyle, with the whole, I wanted to run it back this year, that's not sustainable. That kind of goes against everything he's ever preached about. If you stay the same, if you're either getting better or you're staying the same. And for him to say, we're going to run it back with the same roster, just kind of blew my mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Vish? Yeah.
For me, I think Javi, that was the thing that was kind of ominous. I mean, this was, to quote Stephen A. Smith and the Dallas Cowboys, this was a season of what can go wrong went wrong for the 49ers. Everything went wrong. But I think it started off in bad taste when they tried to rebuild something and redo something that didn't work. We could get into all the details and everything of why it didn't work and why Jimmy Garoppolo didn't throw to George Kittle on 3rd and 5 and threw it to Kendrick Bourne, and how there was not a holding call called in the Super Bowl. All of those things are true, and yet it didn't work. That's the bottom line. And they tried to build a worse version of it. And I think that's where there were other holes in this roster that they neglected a year ago. And those holes have once again shown their furry head once again. And I hope they address them this year. I think the thing with the running backs that you said, Javi, is interesting because I'm kind of in between being like an analytics guy when it comes to running backs and being like a football traditionalist. So the way I see it is I think a running back is worth a high pick. I don't think he's worth a second contract. So I think if you put a guy like Dalvin Cook in this offense, from day one, you can get a Super Bowl level running game with Dalvin Cook. Like the difference between Raheem Mostert's a good player enhanced by this scheme with one exceptional trait. Dalvin Cook has like 5 exceptional traits, and he can carry an entire offense for 16 games on end. Derrick Henry is doing it. And I think that if Kyle Shanahan, instead of getting 4 running backs who are undrafted, who he maximizes for individual games on the season, if he can get a guy that he can just turn and run it the way his dad had it with Terrell Davis for years. Like Olandis Gary had success, Clinton Portis had success, Mike Bell had success, Tatum Bell had success, but none of them had the success that Terrell Davis had. And I think maybe if, Travis Etienne, if that's the guy Kyle likes, obviously they're not going to take a running back in the first down, but could you imagine like a Dalvin Cook in this offense, a player of that caliber? Right. It would be something. So I really like that. I think that's intriguing, but I don't think that'll be addressed. The bottom line is the quarterback position has to be addressed. I'm really excited to see how they do it. I've been all over the Matthew Stafford train. That's who I want. That's where I think they should go. We'll see if the contract stuff works out. We'll see if his wife is willing to come to San Francisco. That's another ordeal.
Vish, you had to, bro.
I mean,
but you know what? You joke, right? But that's something, right? Like, happy wife, happy life. Like,
listen,
what if she's
the
like,
money's
I'm not
coming,
going?
she's coming.
Of course. But hey, anyway. But yeah, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and so that's going to be the bottom line. But this was just a season of, well, we can evaluate a bunch of things, but ultimately there was way too much that went wrong for us to have a strong opinion about anything. Right. Like we can have a strong opinion about Kyle, but then there's too many things that we can't leave out. So then we can't really say Kyle had a bad season, And so it's unfortunate that it happened that way. We'll just have to see what happens next year and form our judgments then on who these people are as players and coaches.
You got it, Akash?
Yeah, I think big picture, it tells you that there's 2 things that are important in the NFL to consistently make the playoffs and be a contender. head coach and a good head coach and a quarterback, right? Those are the two things above everything else. And I swear it feels like when we talk about injuries, everyone doesn't focus as much on Garoppolo and they talk about Bosa and Kittle and everything else that's happened with this team. When it's like, if they had a competent starting quarterback for 16 games, they'd probably still be in the playoffs even with all of those other injuries. Like, the positional impact that the quarterback has in the NFL is so high compared to the other positions that as long as you have someone competent there that starts for 16 games, it almost doesn't matter what you do at the other position just because their coaching staff is so good that they'll win enough games to get to the playoffs. Would they be a Super Bowl contender? Probably not. But that's all it comes down to. And so that's probably what kind of my biggest takeaway from the season is they need to get that quarterback position locked down in terms of finding someone that Kyle trusts, Kyle believes in, that he is sort of in sync with and lockstep with, and someone that is healthy and capable of starting, 16 games. And, we talk about, I feel like a lot of people hit on like, oh, hey, like it's not Jimmy Garoppolo's fault that he's hurt, but it's like at the end of the day, it's a results-based business. Either you're on the field or you're not. And, in his career, even in New England, he's battled injuries. He came here at the torn ACL. Now he's had multiple high ankle sprains, and it's like Kyle Shanahan and his team is taking a bad rap for the fact that he's, unable to stay on the field healthy. So that's probably going to be the biggest decision this offseason. Like Vish mentioned, whether they go the veteran route or they go the rookie route or whatever they choose to do, the direction of this franchise for the next few years is going to be determined by who they play at quarterback. The next thing is these roster decisions that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan primarily have made that were, kind of hidden last season because they won so much. They came to, they showed themselves this season, like whiffing on Solomon Thomas, whiffing on Reuben Foster, having a bad first draft in 2017. And, just misses like that, misses like Dante Pettis, things like that come back to bite you in the butt when you have all these injuries and you need depth. But even if their depth is good, it's because all those misses, they just don't have those guys. And then they've made mistakes with, like trading for D Ford and giving him that giant contract, or paying Weston Richburg and he's not on the field, or restructuring Quan Alexander's contract and then now trading him. And so all of these little mistakes that they've made that they've been able to hide last year, they got exposed this year amidst all the injuries. So it's just things to learn from. First-time GM, first-time head coach. They've got to figure it out, and hopefully they can piece it together as they move forward.
Jason,
my bad. Go ahead.
Before you jump in, I just wanted to say two things because I think Akash just nailed it. He just nailed it because there's two things. The one is the misses. I think the misses are going to start to bite them now. When you miss on Dante Pettis, who you traded up 2 picks to get, that means you trade 2 picks to get Emmanuel Sanders because Pettis can't play, and then you trade 3 more picks to trade up for Brandon Ayuk to replace what Pettis was supposed to be. That's 7 different players you're missing out on because you couldn't get Dante Pettis. They got away with Solomon Thomas because Balky had Eric Armstead sitting here, who's basically what Solomon Thomas was supposed to be. And now when guys start to walk, when a Jaquaski Tart walks and Tarvarius Moore isn't ready to start at safety in the NFL level, well, now safety is added to the need of positions when we thought it would just be interior O-line quarterback, and when Reuben Foster fails and you got to fork out that much money for a Quan Alexander, now you don't have the cap room to sign your franchise player in a DeForest Buckner. So these kinds of things are going to start to bite them. And it's going to be real interesting how they pivot from there because it feels like they have a value chart and the way Kyle and John have kind of done things is we're just going to keep trying to get it right at those value chart positions. So defensive line, we're just going to keep trying to get it right. Wide receiver, we're just going to keep trying to get it right until we get it right. Well, center, again, they're going to be back in the center market because center is an important position for them. But there's still positions like corner. Where's the investment going to be? Can you keep trotting out these guys and playing just zone coverages and stuff like that? Interesting. Let's see what happens. They never addressed the guard position that much. I guess they gave Laken Tomlinson an extension, but to me, the guard position this year felt like $3 million for Mike Person last year. Let's just replace that with $3 million with Tom Compton this year. And the right guard was a little bit of a bust. Maybe Colton McKivitz is something, but it's going to be really interesting because they have like 30 decisions to make this offseason, and these 30 decisions are going to define Kyle Shanahan's coaching career as the 49ers coach.
Yep.
And then
go ahead, Javi.
Just real quick to add, 2020 is the hindsight year. This could be, this is their out for Jimmy Garoppolo too. This is where it lined up perfectly, and the way the season rolled out, Kyle has an easy out. The franchise has an easy out. You can go get the guy you want to get, and like Akash said, if you don't have the quarterback, you don't have anything anyways. So go get that guy, and then you can kind of work around everything else. But Vish hit it on the head, though. I've been saying it for 2 years now. You miss on Ruben, you miss on Solomon. It's going to bite you in the ass. And then the Richburg thing, he had an injury concern in New York, but when he is on the field, he's an excellent center, but he's not on the field. So now these things are compounding, and they have to figure it out. I think Kyle is good enough to overcome a lot of this stuff, because even with these injuries, they're still competitive with a Nick Mullins. So get yourself the quarterback, and everything else kind of hides, but you can kind of piece these things together and figure it out. Right. If you go get a Matthew Stafford, cool, go do that. If you love one of these quarterbacks, do whatever you have to do to go get one, and then you figure it out from there. Now, as a reasonable fan, I'm not expecting a Super Bowl next year. I'm not even expecting a Super Bowl in 2022. By 2023, this team needs to be in an NFC Championship game competing for a Super Bowl. That is a reasonable fan take, and that's how it should be. But no, everyone wants this. He's got to be super fast. Jimmy Garoppolo, I was in love with the guy when he first came here. I was like, oh, cool. He sounded like a NFL quarterback. Right. I mean, we watched Hoyer and CJ that whole year. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. He comes in with his cadence, and you're like, oh shit, we have a quarterback.
Unfortunately, he only sounds like an NFL quarterback.
And then franchise quarterback. And what kind of puts him in the franchise quarterback conversation is his salary, not his play. And when you start digging into the numbers, and you really dig into the numbers like Akash did last night, he's not the guy. And it's very clear. And Kyle Shanahan made it very clear in his press conference today about how he's taking the ball out of guys' hands after interceptions. And it goes right back to the Minnesota game in the playoffs where we all denied it. And he said it. He said it, and I'm done. Don't talk to me no more about Kyle doesn't take the Kyle trusts his guys. Kyle does not trust none of his guys.
That was a really good quote.
Yeah, that's what, I was going to say on top of that. And because when I saw that, I was like, wow, he's directly talking about something that really happened. Like, so that should just take that discussion out. Another thing, I'm glad you brought up the Jimmy thing. So, like, for any fan that's here and wants to hear why the 49ers can move off, it's just how his contract was set up, right? Like, I hate the comparison and when people are like, oh, well, you don't see McVay looking to move off of Goff. Oh, well, you don't see them. They can't move off of Cousins or Goff. That's not how their contract's set up, guys. This isn't Madden, okay? Look, it's a perfect storm of circumstances, play, and his contract. That's it. Like, it's not some just get Jimmy out of here. It's how his contract was set up. And that's how it is. It's not a hate against him. It's just the facts. It's just what it is. If you have a chance to have a guy who has missed how many games with us? 20?
23.
23, something like that.
23 games. You're paying him $27 million. And now there's this litany of draft picks and all these other scenarios of guys that you can use to upgrade the position. Why is this even so much of a push and a pushback on? Like, I don't get it. Like, you guys see the out. The path is there. They don't even have to do anything crazy. Just follow the contract that they set. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know, Akash, I've seen you tweet it, but stop telling me that McVay wants to move off. He can't. He's stuck. Stop telling me that they want to move away from Cousins. You can't. He's stuck. That's different. That's why it's different between them and Jimmy.
Yeah, there's a bunch of like these system quarterbacks that run a very similar type of offense, whether it's you mentioned Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff or Ryan Tannehill was probably the best version, I'd say. Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, they're kind of in the same mold. Right? If the situation is good, if they've got a good running attack, if they've got a good offensive line, if they've got a good enough defense, and obviously a good enough coach, they'll succeed like Jimmy Garoppolo did last season, right? He's perfect to play complementary football. Obviously, the one flaw I think Jimmy has over the other guys is he turns the ball over a little bit too much, and probably for that's the one thing that probably disappoints Kyle a little bit.
It's acceptable to some people.
Yeah, but wait, hold on. Before we do that, didn't Mayoko said something that was I think it was him.
Yeah, it was him.
For a guy who takes no chances, for you to turn the ball over that much is horrible. That makes no sense, dude.
Well, I don't think that's exactly fair to say he doesn't take chances because he's kind of a one-spot thrower.
Okay.
He throws basically all of his throws, if you chart them, other than the Kyle Shanahan gimmies that are the flat throws and the ones that are the little push passes, he's basically attacking the same like 5 to 10 yard range in between the hashes. And if you put that in a box and you keep throwing there, they're gonna clog coverage there, and he still tries to throw there. So he throws a lot of risky short throws, which kind of just speaks to his limitations and his unwillingness to just throw the football outside when the throws are there, being able to push the ball 18, 20 yards down the field.
That's what I meant.
Outside.
It's not, he's never taking shots downfield. Like, he doesn't have
Right.
arm punts, right? Like, for a guy who's intermediate, right, those are supposed to be accurate throws, right? Those aren't supposed to be those turnover worthy plays like you're talking about.
I think Mina Kimes had it best. It was like a graph that had like average depth of target on like the x-axis and like turnover rate on the y-axis. And it was like Garoppolo had the third shortest ADOT, average depth of target, but like the third highest turnover rate. Like, it just did not make sense. He was kind of in his own area. And that, I'm sure, was the hell out of Kyle.
I remember that graph. You had Jameis Winston, who was like on one different axis because I think he had the highest depth of target and the highest turnover rate. And then I remember Matthew Stafford really stood out in that graph because he had a very high depth of target, but I think his turnover rate was less than guys like even like Jimmy and stuff. But so Matthew Stafford.
Right. But just back to what you were saying about, Mayoko's comment. Yeah. And it's kind of the momentum is starting to build now with everyone is starting to realize, what this team would look like with a better quarterback that's more established, who's just not more of like a system quarterback, who's obviously can stay healthy for 16 games, despite the other injuries. And so, the momentum I feel like is starting to build, especially given the fact that they can get out of his contract. They're probably going to have a top 10 pick where they could draft a quarterback if they wanted. They could trade that pick then for someone else. So they've got just a plethora of options this offseason, but it's critical that they make the right one, because if they wait or hesitate, then they could be set back again in 2021. And I'm sure fans.
No, I know. I know. We could talk all day about this. So let's try to move it along a little bit, just so we're not here for like 2 hours. So look, another thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of been, it's kind of been on the timeline for a little while, right? And it's some things that I've seen, some articles, things like that. Just, I want to get your guys' thoughts on coaching. Like me, you don't have to ask me, right? Check my timeline. Shanistan. Hashtag Shanistan, right? I don't care. For better or worse, to a fault, that's fine. There's things that he does that I don't always agree with. But for better or worse, he's my coach, and I'm standing behind him, and I don't want him to leave this team, okay? But a lot of chatter this week around handling of personnel, the players that he's picking on game day and things like that. I'll start with you, Akash. I think you kind of fall in line with the way that I think about Kyle, but, just talk to me a little bit more about Kyle and and Salah, right? And we might as well talk about both of them while we're talking about it. So, so just talk to me about that.
Yeah. So let's talk about Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, not like the roster
designer.
I think extremely highly of him, man. Just kind of what this franchise has seen before him with Jim Tomsula and Chip Kelly, and just kind of the incompetence they've had. And now with Kyle Shanahan, just how stable they look. Obviously, what he does from an offensive standpoint, just his play design. I hate nitpicking play calls because it's really nuanced. Like when people nitpick like shotgun runs or what he does on fourth down. Or
look at Vish's face. No, look at Vish's face. You said Vish's word. If Vish has a brand, it's called nuance. That's it. You just nailed it. I'll keep going. No, because I'm sorry.
I hate nitpicking a certain play call because I'm not sure what he's thinking in that moment, what weaknesses he's seen over the course of the game. Obviously, he has backups executing, so that plays a factor in it. So I hate that part of it when people call him out for that kind of stuff. But just, designing a game plan, all that kind of stuff, I have full confidence in him. And just as a leader, I think he's done a really good job with just being honest and upfront. He's not someone, we hear stories in the NFL about coaches that, are, not being completely real with their players, or they treat their players poorly. It's none of that stuff goes on with Kyle Shanahan. All their players, play extremely hard for him. Even last year, we heard a lot of things where players would be like, hey, we had the answers to the test before we played the game. Like what Kyle said would happen, happened. And we saw a lot of that stuff. Obviously, the clip that went viral where I think he's telling a referee when George Kittle runs the out route, he's like, hey, watch, Redmond's going to hold him. He holds him. That kind of stuff. When you see that, that Kyle's really capable of what he does on the field as a coach. Obviously, that goes with Robert Saleh as well. I think it comes back to Kyle, the roster builder, where you have question marks, right? And a lot of people will point to John Lynch or Adam Peters or whatever the case, but Kyle Shanahan, I think, is the at the top of the food chain. He's the guy. He's the boss. And you question his decisions like, why do you trade up for a CJ Beathard? You sign Nick Mullins as an undrafted free agent, but you don't bring in anybody else. You make, moves that we've talked about, whether it's a trading up for a Dante Pettis or these kind of things. And, that's the kind of stuff that's hindered them, right? And when we say all these injuries and all that kind of stuff, well, they've had whiffs in the draft. They had whiffs in free agency that's kind of caused that stuff. So that's where it's like, you need some balance in like helping build the roster. But if they have a good group that's healthy, I have full faith that Kyle can deliver a team that gets to the postseason and can potentially compete for the Super Bowl like they did last year.
Right. Okay, Vish, talk to me about Kyle and don't glow too much.
Yeah, so I'm feeling the same way Akash feels. So I mean, he has his flaws, right? And I think we've all pointed them out at times. Maybe we don't press on them as much as others who press on flaws that don't exist. But here's the bottom line. The 49ers right now have the Trevor Lawrence of head coaches. They have the 40-year-old coaching prospect that everybody wants. He's the guy everybody wants. He's the genius. So does he have flaws? Does he have flaws? Yeah, this sums it up. Does he have flaws? Yeah, but you're not going to find a better coach in the market. And I think a lot of the little things that we nitpick at is something I've looked at. Like, I used to nitpick the fact that he doesn't baby his players like, say, McVay does. McVay sits there and just babies all his guys by taking all the blame and always saying it's his fault and those kinds of things. And, it looks great from an optics perspective from the media. But I think something that players really respect about Kyle is the fact that he's an adult and he treats them as adults. He's not their high school coach. He doesn't need to sit there and tell them that you didn't make a mistake. He's not holding their hands. He's being honest. He's being forthcoming. And he's basically telling them how it is. And if they don't like it, then that style of coaching is not for them, like a Dante Pettis. And if they like it, they succeed under it, like a George Kittle. So he's really great. And, the roster building thing, yeah, it bothers me. But you know what? If Kyle Shanahan needs to have full control of the roster so that he can be Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, then have with it. If it's because I'd rather have that, Jed York, when he hired Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, it was all about two guys working synchronously together in unison, basically, because they had the problems where Balky was picking guys that didn't work for Vic Fangio's defense and didn't work for Jim Harbaugh. And Chip Kelly, he wasn't picking guys that fit what they wanted. He was just picking guys who he deemed talented. So if they're going to just pick guys that Kyle wants, then yeah, you better have faith because, Kyle has proven that this coaching staff is phenomenal when it comes to player development. I mean, how many teams have a Ross Dwelly, a Nick Mullins, who's a backup player, who else? Emmanuel Mosley, so many different Kevin Givens, how many different undrafted guys are contributing after spending 1 to 2 years in this system, in this building. And, Bill Belichick, the GM, is pretty horrible. How many busts does Bill Belichick, the GM, have? And as long as Kyle Shanahan finds his quarterback and as long as he's willing to adjust to whoever that is as a talented quarterback, he's going to be a superstar head coach. And nitpicking at him and stuff is part of it, but at the end of the day, the Niners have the guy that everybody else wants, and you should be excited about that.
And I think the big thing is from the earlier drafts we've seen, he drafted a Dante Pettis for whatever reason. He saw it didn't work out, and now the two receivers since Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk have really worked out. So there's clearly a learning process that's happened. And hopefully that happens with quarterback. Obviously in 2017 and 2018, he's kind of admitted to not really scouting quarterbacks. And I read this somewhere and it really rung home. They said, Kyle, the offensive coordinator in 2017, probably just wanted someone to run his pretty diagrams that he draws up on the whiteboard. And he thought, hey, if we can run these plays, we'll be fine. But now 4 years in and he has this losing record under 500, he probably realizes, man, I need someone that I can work with hand in hand, and someone that can almost elevate my offense and can stay on the field so that we can start to win games. Because at the end of the day, when you're a head coach, offensive or defensive, it doesn't matter as long as you win games. Like we talk about Sean McDermott, for example. His offense is really good. His defense is actually not that good. But as long as he wins game, McDermott gets the credit. And it would be the same thing for Kyle, right? Regardless of his defense, offense, whatever it is, as long as he wins, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if his offense is first, if his defense is first, whatever. He's going to get the credit. So I wonder if he's made that realization. Well, I hope he has.
And then
Right.
just two things before you guys go. My bad for taking up so much time, but two things.
No, you're
just
good.
One thing that Akash said that was very interesting is he talked about the Sean McDermott example. And I think Kyle's mindset is kind of the same way. There's a reason they've been drafting defense so heavily with his time here outside of investing in the receiver position in high rounds. It's because I think Kyle looks at it and says, if my defense can confidently hold teams to 20 points or 22 points, and I can be confident in my defense, then I'll manage to score 24 and we'll win that way because my play calling is that good. So I love that self-belief. And then the other thing is, I totally lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Javi.
Yo, don't feel, Vish, do not feel bad, man. Now, I actually feel better because I know how your brain works and everything. So if it happens to you, then I don't feel so bad, like at all. So like, if you get it back, let me know. But Javi, give us your thoughts, bro.
Yeah, I mean, with Kyle, 30 teams would be lined up right now if the Niners got rid of him, and he would be hired in 20 seconds. So 49ers fans got to relax. Nitpicking him over play calls, like the guy said, it's stupid. It's nuanced. You need to really look at the play design, look at what they're looking at. And with Kyle, he's maximized his players in this offense. And that's where I'm like, I'm not going to blame these coaches. Like, people are like, oh, coach them up. Sometimes guys are just maxed out. They've reached their potential and that's it. Can they get a little bit more? Maybe. But in the case of the quarterback room, I think they've all been peaked. The running backs, I think there might be a little bit more there. But with Breida, you got an undrafted free agent to go out there and almost get you 1,000 yards in this offense. I think Kyle Shanahan as the head coach is growing and learning. Like Akash said, he wanted a guy like Hoyer to come in and, hey, look, you know this play, and run it, we can execute it if this will be here if you execute it correctly. But he's growing as the head coach now and looking at his own division. Wait a second, I might need a quarterback who's going to elevate this offense. Steve Young said it on ESPN a couple weeks ago during this whole Jimmy Garoppolo may not be here any longer. Kyle has all these beautiful mind plays in his head, and he can't use them with the quarterbacks that he has. So he's going to find an offensive coordinator type of quarterback on the field. And I think he's growing as a head coach. I think he's the right guy for this team. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be here 10, 11, 12 years without question.
So, Jason, I do remember what I wanted to say real quick. Can I go?
You got
Okay, so the one thing is about the quarterbacks, right? It's because the reason we nitpick at these draft picks so much is because the 49ers don't have a quarterback. Seattle had two good drafts that built a Super Bowl roster, and I would argue the reason they had those two good drafts is because Pete Carroll came straight from college, and these were all the players he recruited at his time. So it was kind of like Jimmy Johnson, early Cowboys-esque, where he knew all the guys that were coming in. He knew their traits because he spent time recruiting them from high school, and he was able to draft well and build a Super Bowl roster. How many different draft busts have they had since then? I mean, a lot of the Niners failures go there and have kind of a second act because the Seattle drafts so poorly. But when you have Russell Wilson, we don't see it. Green Bay hasn't drafted particularly well. So if the Niners get a quarterback, drafts won't look this bad. You'll have more 2017 drafts because the draft is a total crapshoot. The other thing is
extremely
right. It's a total crapshoot. And then the other thing is, Javi brought it up and Akash brought it up. It's with nitpicking play calls. I'm going to say it right now. It's the most bogus and lazy way to analyze football out there. Let's go, Vish. Bogus. It's a result-oriented way of looking at a play that didn't work and then saying that you should have done something else. Well, you have to put yourself in that position and say, why did he call that play? What was he seeing? Why was their game plan that way? So that's why I don't think evaluating play calls is the way you want to evaluate a play caller. Evaluate their game plans. Well, every single game, Kyle Shanahan has the right idea on how to beat the defense and attack the defense he's going against and how to win the game. So how can you go back and say, well, they shouldn't have run Kyle Juszczyk on 4th and 1? Well, what was the look that they were given? Was it the right call given the context? Was it the game situation? Nobody ever takes those things into account. Just say, run it with Debo or run it with Ayuk just because you didn't do it. Just because always what you didn't do is the correct play call. So if it doesn't work. So I think it's just bogus. I think people need to stop doing that. It's really a trash way to evaluate football.
Vish, I'm not posting any more clips, Vish. That's it. You just talked me out of it. I'm done. I'm sorry.
My favorite one was 2 weeks ago. They played the Bills. Debo didn't get any touches in the first half. And I swear, everyone was like, why didn't Debo get any touches? Why didn't Debo get any touches? And it was like, dude, he's being guarded by Tre'Davious White. They're just attacking the weaker corner. And as Tre'Davious White shifted to Brandon Ayuk, they used Debo in the second half. It's like, come on, guys. It's like, let's think a little just beyond, what's happening.
And,
it's like,
where were the jet sweeps?
this stuff.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Jet sweeps, but they're setting the edge, and they've got guys wider than normal to stop all of that. Like, that's the thing, right, guys? It's like, see, this is my thing, right? The same thing, and I'll put a bow on it so we can move on too, right? But I agree in the same thing, right? Like, every play gets you to the next play, right? And you have to remember situations, down and distance, all that stuff looks like. I think that, you know, now it's harder. People give their thoughts on a play, not understanding responsibilities, not understanding looks, right? Like, you know, Javi, I talked about it. There's concepts in this passing game of where pre-snap you have to cut off half of the field, and now you make your reads on whatever side, right? Like that's there. Like, and we talked about it, right? You know, if me as a play caller, I give you the layup. I said this on Leo's show, and I'm using it again because it works. If I'm giving you the layup and you can't make it, I'm not giving you the fast break. When we're down, I'm not going to give you the harder things to do if you can't do the easy things, right? So now as a play caller, now you have to cut half of your playbook off because you cannot execute certain reads, right? One more thing about Kyle. Andy Reid, for how long, was known as this offensive genius, couldn't manage a clock, can't win the big game. How long did that narrative stand for? Kyle Shanahan's in his 5th year head coach? Andy Reid was labeled that for like 20-something years. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody gets to where they get to differently. And notice, all of a sudden, Andy Reid wins a Super Bowl. How did that happen? A quarterback.
Get the quarterback, Kyle. Get the quarterback.
All right. So I think, you know, turning the page was the name of this, right? So I guess it is turn the page, right? So turn the page to it's officially draft season. Over under how many mock drafts you've done? Javi, you go first.
Right now I think I've done 6. I haven't been going crazy. I've been watching more tape. So
okay, Vish.
Yeah, I don't do mock drafts. I hate the concept of draft and draft analyzing, just because I just find the experts with the profession to be a little disingenuous in the sense that I feel like it's more hearsay rather than evaluation. So all the scouts are telling them that these are the first round picks. So these are the players they mock from September to January. Now the coaches and GMs start really diving into the heavy hitters. And that's why you see DJ Hayden, who was projected as a 3rd round pick 2 weeks before the draft. You know, all the draft analysts turned on more tape and just decided he was going to be a top 15 pick. No, they were hearing stuff that he's going in the top 15. That's why last year, Jake Fromm is, if you open any mock draft from September 2019, Jake Fromm is a top 10 pick. And it's not that they turned on more tape and decided that he doesn't have the physical skill set to be a starting NFL quarterback. I think they were told, like, the GMs and the coaches got into it and said, no, this is a 5th round pick. And that's why he went in the 5th round. So I don't get into that. I just like to track who's getting traction when it comes to the 49ers and just focusing on the first round guys, the 1 or 2 guys that I really like, and just trying to watch them and just get myself excited. But either way, usually by draft night, whether I like the guy the day before or the week before, I'm going to find a way to convince myself to like him, at least for that offseason. So that's that.
Akash, you do mock drafts?
I've done 0 so far. I generally don't do mock drafts. And it's kind of the point that Vish hit on, right? It's so as guys that kind of sit at home and all we get access to is like film, it's like you don't know the other half of it, right? Which is like, what is their work ethic? What's their personality? Like, how do they treat people in the building? Like, all that kind of stuff. What are their, like, you know, prior stuff that we have like no exposure to, right? All we see is what they play and what their stats are. And obviously, you know, someone like me, I don't have the time of day to like watch everybody, and you're relying and you're reading, you know, guys in the profession that are like draft scouts or whatever. And like Vish said, you know, how transparent is that process? I don't really know. So obviously you see all the 1st and 2nd round names and you kind of have an idea of who you think the 49ers would like to take, but it's a process that changes so quickly. Even just last year, between what the 49ers did kind of in free agency, I'm sure that had an impact on what their draft plans were with trading Buckner and then going ahead and getting Kinlaw. And so this stuff moves day to day. And so it makes no sense sitting here in like December to do like mock drafts when you have kind of an idea of where they're going to draft, but you have no idea how they're going to address the quarterback position and what else they're going to do. So I try to, you know, just stay kind of tunnel vision and, you know, ride out the next few weeks of the season, and then we'll kind of get the free agency first. Then we'll worry about the draft, you know, post free agency. Because until then, you don't really know what their needs are and what they're going to address and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of too early.
I'm with Vish too about, you know, mocking somebody in December that ends up like falling out of the first round completely, right? Like, so it's like it's so fluid. I think, it's just a way to keep the mind nimble, and a lot of people, fancy themselves GM. So I haven't gotten into it yet, but I'm about to. But I think we all have just hit on the point of, quarterback is what it is, right? Needs to be addressed. What would be second on this team that needs to be addressed? Let's see. Vish, you tell me what's second. What needs to be addressed here?
The center position. I don't understand. Like, I think everybody said I didn't actually realize when they said Weston Richburg would come back this year, because I remember like the Twitter doctors who were surprisingly extremely accurate. Like, the guys who post on Twitter the breakdowns. Yeah, they're very accurate. I remember him saying there's no way Big West is going to come back next year. Like, this is bad. And, it's crazy because he suffered the torn quad, right, in 2018, and he somehow played through that. And that's the injury that ended Tony Parker's career in basketball, ended Charles Barkley's career in basketball. So it's a very serious injury. And then the patella, which is an incredibly serious injury as well, where I just think that can you rely on Big West to even be a contributor at this time? I don't know. I think they got to get a legitimate center, some guy who can be confident enough to make all the line calls. I think if they get a center of Big West's level, then the guard position will kind of fix itself. And, McGlinchey's gotten a lot of flack. He is what he is. Good run blocker, mediocre pass blocker. It's unfortunate that he was picked 9th overall, and he's a mediocre pass blocker when you see guys like Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs and Becton showing that they're legitimately franchise tackles. McGlinchey isn't one of those guys, but he's certainly worthy of getting a medium-level second contract just because of his run blocking and his fit for the scheme. So, yeah, I think the center position will fix a lot of issues with the offensive line. And obviously quarterback's the number one need, but that's where I would go.
Can you guys see us? I don't know what's going on. Like, are you guys, Akash, you still see us, or is it all just green right now?
I see you.
Okay, cool. See you. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't have to see us as long as we're still here. Okay, so Akash, tell me, what's second?
I would go with pass rusher.
Okay.
This defense is built on a pass rush. They've built it, defensive line first, based on how they've drafted, how they've signed free agents, how they've traded for guys. You know how they're built. They've talked about it. Robert Hall has talked about it. But that being said, their two best pass rushers haven't played basically the entire season. Is D Ford ever going to play again? Like, he may be done. Nick Bosa's coming off of a torn ACL. Like, what can we realistically expect from him in 2021? I think everyone just kind of expects, he'll be fine and he'll just be back to his 2019 self. But usually it takes a year after that ACL injury for guys really to find their stride. And so I would say, especially with all the holes at corner and potentially safety, if they can really address the pass rush this season or this offseason, then they can improve that defense, which Robert Saleh has done a really good job with. I think they're top 10 in a lot of the advanced metrics, but they don't have a pass rush, and that's kind of screwed them in games against Aaron Rodgers, against Josh Allen. They've just been unable to do anything because they can't rush the quarterback, and he has all day to throw. So if they can find Nick Bosa a complement and someone that's not Kerry Hyder's good, but he's a depth piece. He's that second package. They have a name for it. I can't remember, Turbo or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If they can find a pass rusher, I think that would be the first need, I'd say.
Okay. Javi?
Yeah, those are the two that I've been preaching. I preached it all last offseason. You needed to go get a center because Weston Richburg was not going to come back. A patellar tendon. Me and you talked about it, Jason. The last guy that we saw tear patellar tendon in the NFL was Victor Cruz, and he didn't play. So I didn't expect a center who has to be bent down that often to come back and play, and I don't think he's going to play ever again. Tim Ryan mentioned it on KNBR once that he doesn't expect Weston Richburg to ever play football again. So, they should have addressed the center position. Matt Hennessy was a guy that I liked in this past draft out of Temple. He ends up going to Atlanta, who's going to replace Alex Mack probably next season anyway. So that should have been something they addressed this past offseason. But they're back in it. Like Vish said earlier, these things are compounding, these misses. You have to go get a center. And then I think right after center, you can get yourself an edge player like a Shaka Toney out of Penn State, who should be there in the 3rd or 4th round. Those guys, you need that speed edge rusher. I don't think you need a D Ford type or D Ford player talent wise, but you need somebody who's going to force that tackle to think ahead of time, like, hey, I got to get to this step before he gets there, and that's going to force the quarterback into certain spots. So center, I think, is going to be quarterback, center, edge, and corner in that order this draft season.
Yeah, and when my second would have been interior O-line, which basically ties into all of that. It's just, again, like we've talked about it, we kind of wish that Kyle valued his guards a little bit more because everything seems to be about the tackles. Like we saw it this week, right? You press somebody to playing a position that they never played, and then when they play bad, you get mad at them. Like, I'm not certain. Like, I don't get it, man. Like, the guy's never played, like I'm talking about school, right? School had issues playing a position that he's never played. Imagine that, like these are the, like, I don't understand people, like you're killing Justin School. Like, if I've never done something at my job, right? And they're like, you know what, we need you to do this and we need you to do it very well immediately. Pretty much anybody would have a problem, especially since they're not, people tend to forget that guard and tackle are two different techniques, two different responsibilities, and there's two different things that you do, two different ways that you play. So I would have said interior O-line as well too, just because I'm tired of seeing people just run through the middle, at this point, and I mean, a lot of it has to do with just injuries and things like that. But we saw it a little bit last year at the end of the year as well too. So yeah, I mean, it's got to be interior O-line for me.
Yeah, right. I mean, Chris Jones dominating the Super Bowl wasn't something we haven't seen because we lost the Atlanta game because Grady Jarrett whipped up this offensive line. And only reason we won the Rams game is because they took pity on us and took Aaron Donald out of the game for 2 plays that ended up in a 40-yard completion to Kittle and a 12-yard Tevin Coleman run. Otherwise, we were struggling that entire second half against the Rams. So it wasn't something that wasn't there. It was just something that they deemed as not as important as replacing Buck and Emmanuel Sanders, I guess.
Right. Anything else? Anybody else?
It comes back to the point that Vish hit on earlier, where Kyle thinks if it's offensive, he could just scheme around it, and they'd rather prioritize defensively.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, at some point, your scheme only works if you have good players, and you might have to upgrade your center and your guard spots. So.
Right.
I do have a question.
Yep.
No, you go ahead about this because I got a question kind of unrelated, but it was a thought that popped in my head. I want to run it by you guys.
Well, it is a little unrelated too, but I mean, I felt like this is what ties into what, makes me say that Saleh did such a great job, right? Because last year, it's pretty simple to, say, hey, Bosa, hey, Ford, go get him, and then you just have everybody in coverage. Like, he had to get creative in the way that he was mixing up his coverages and blitzes, and he worked his ass off this year. And I think that, it was all because of the injuries, right? Like, I'm not trying to downplay anything that Saleh did, but it is a lot easier to call games when Nick Bosa's in the backfield immediately. So is D Ford, right? You take those things away, and then you really find out what you're made of as far as the coach goes. So it all ties back into the coaching thing about, getting this team to play well. And a little bit more, like I forgot to say this before when we were talking about, Kyle. This team plays for Kyle, and they appreciate his honesty also. Like, they appreciate the fact that he's not going to baby you. He's going to come in and tell you, and he's going to be right up front with you, even if it's a tough conversation. And I think that the men like to be treated like that. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that Saleh thing, but I just wanted to make sure that was out there about Saleh too, because, the whole idea of him coaching well is because, he's had to coach around those deficiencies and things like that. And I think he's done a hell of a job.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal.
Go ahead.
We got to hurry.
No,
Zach
you go.
about to come on.
I was also going to – yeah, that's true. I was also going to credit Joe Woods because I would say that Robert Saleh pre-Joe Woods was running more of a traditional Seattle cover 3. And then Joe Woods comes along last season, and they run a lot of the, man matching and pattern matching coverages that you've seen these past 2 seasons. So I feel like he gets a lot of credit too that Robert Saleh has kind of adopted since. But yeah, he's done a hell of a job with the roster that he's had, and it's unfair criticism to him when they get beat up by the Bills or the Packers or whatever, and it's like they just don't have the Jimmies and the Joes to like compete with some of these offensive teams.
Right. I like that.
That's my favorite one. We can't stop number 1 receivers. Well, yeah, Devontae Adams is Devontae Adams for a reason. Nobody can stop him. Yeah. There's a reason DK Metcalf is DK Metcalf. What a novel concept. We're another team that can't stop DK Metcalf. Whoa, mind-blowing. That one gets me every time. But the one I wanted to run by you guys is obviously you guys know where my heart is with the quarterback situation. It's Matthew Stafford.
Bust, right? Stafford.
Right. But everybody has been throwing out every single name imaginable the last 4 months or so, or 2 months, 3 months. Yeah. And basically the name that I haven't seen that I think actually makes a lot of sense with drafting a quarterback is Andy Dalton. And the reason I say Andy Dalton is because Kyle, one thing he's obsessed about, right, is that he wants his quarterbacks to make sure that they give his play a chance, which means that what they see, they're going to the right spot with the ball based on coverage. That's why he was pretty okay with Nick Mullins' first interception. The problem is a lot of these young quarterbacks like Kyler Murray, they don't always go to where the right spot is with the ball, if you know what I mean. They're kind of sometimes bailing on the play, and because they're so gifted physically, they make 3 more plays, and the coach has to live with that. Well, I don't know if Kyle would put a guy out there who does that or live with that. And so I think Andy Dalton for $8 to $10 million, from a physical standpoint, he is not really a drop-off from Jimmy. He's played at a level in his career with different play callers that has been around Jimmy Goff, maybe even a little better. He was in a pretty crappy situation in Cincinnati, and yet Hugh Jackson got a job coaching with Andy Dalton. Jay Gruden got a job coaching with Andy Dalton. So for $8 to $10 million, if you're getting $17 million cheaper with a young quarterback to sit behind him, I think he's a viable starter that could be an Alex Smith Mahomes type situation, and you can make the playoffs with Andy Dalton.
Yeah, Vish, we said that. Yeah, we said that on our podcast. Sorry.
Oh,
no, we said. No, you're good. No. And you made a really good point. Like we said on our show a couple of times, Matt is like, why don't we just get Andy Dalton? It's cheaper. It's going to cost you $10, $12 million. You go draft the rookie, let him sit. He already came from that Zach Taylor offense, which is pretty much an an offense light. You know what I mean? So he's going to be familiar with the offense. So he's run multiple different types of offenses in his career. So of course he could come in and learn this and then teach it to the young guy. I think Andy Dalton knows who he is at this point in his career. He's going to be the bridge guy for the rest of his career. He's in the Alex Smith mode of his career. Yeah, absolutely. You bring in a guy like Andy Dalton, and you should consider it. But I'm all the way in on Matthew Stafford if he is available, and I think Matthew Stafford has earned enough equity in Detroit to talk to the Fords and be like, listen, I appreciate these 12, 13 years here, but I'm not ready for another rebuild. You need to move me and, make this happen. And, he would probably have a list of destinations, San Francisco, maybe Chicago, maybe, a Denver, something like that. So.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the perfect place to really put an end in it. So I'll let you go, Akash. I mean, because we're almost at an hour right now, and we're we might as well talk, because I mean, this is going to be the question all offseason, right? You might as well get a jump on this right now. What are your all right? So you can make a prediction, but what do you think, Akash, is probably the best way for the 49ers to address this quarterback position?
Oh, that's tough because there's just so many unknowns, right? A, where they're going to draft. B, what is the salary cap going to be? C, how much salary cap space are the 49ers going to have? Is DeVore going to retire and so they can move entirely off the contract, or do they have to cut him and eat some of that space? Are they able to cut Weston Richburg? Will they trade or cut Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, all of these things play into that equation. What is Matthew Stafford going to cost? Is he even going to want out? Maybe they hire an offensive coach. Maybe he wants to stay. What other veteran quarterbacks are there? Are the Jets going to draft a quarterback? Is Sam Darnold going to be available? Is Carson Wentz going to be available? Is Dak Prescott going to be a free agent? Like, all of these things play into that. And so without knowing all of those, it's hard to predict what the 49ers will do. I'm sure even if you ask Kyle today, he won't be able to know, right? He may not be in love with Jimmy Garoppolo. He may think, okay, let me get an upgrade. They did that last season, right? They looked last off season at potential options, and they had decided that Garoppolo was the best possible thing that they could have coming into 2020. So they'll do the same exact thing this offseason. And so when I tweet about, potential rookie quarterbacks, whether it's Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or whatever, it's just because, I'm watching these guys on TV. And so it's easy to tweet about them or whatever. It's not because I think that the 49ers should take them. It's just kind of what I think when I watch them play. So I think there's two things, right? If the 49ers go the veteran route, so Stafford, Wentz, Prescott, whatever, they'll be in win now mode, right? They'll have a quarterback that can come in and day one, they'll have playoff, potentially Super Bowl expectations depending on what the rest of the roster looks like. If they go the rookie bridge quarterback route, that they're kind of gearing for the longer term for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they're kind of resetting and building this thing the right way. So you can go about this a few different ways, and it kind of depends on what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch want. Can they live through another mediocre season where they may go 8-8, 9-7, whatever, with these bridge rookie quarterbacks, or do they want someone that can just come in and win? Like, is Kyle just tired of losing and he just wants someone to come in and win? It really comes down to that, I think. and that'll kind of determine what route they take. Because when they want a guy, they're really aggressive, they go get it. So I'm not worried about that part of it. It's just kind of what route they want to take.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm tired of people telling me that it's not possible to trade up when this regime has shown that all they'll do is trade up if they really identify a guy. So let's put that to bed as well. Vish, any last thoughts on getting Matt Stafford over to San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, I'd cry if it happens. It'd be one of the happiest days of my life. I was telling everybody, hey, if the Niners win the Super Bowl, barring the moment that I age and I get married and the birth of my children, like all that prospective future stuff, this is going to be the happiest day of my life. And then, it didn't turn out to be that. So
marriage is not that great. You'd be all right.
Yeah, so I would be I'd be beyond happy if they got Matthew Stafford. I just think that when you're going to pay a Fred Warner $18 million and you have a George Kittle, who's the highest paid tight end in the NFL, and you have a Deebo Samuel on a rookie contract and a Brandon Ayuk on a rookie contract, and you have Trent Williams, who's going to be a highest paid tackle, I just don't think that you can have an uncertainty at the quarterback position. It's just too much invested in an entire roster and too many excellent players. It's not fair to George Kittle in the middle of his prime to have
Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins or somebody else starting at quarterback. So to me, if Matthew Stafford's available, they got to go all in because talents like Matthew Stafford, first of all, they won't draft a guy. But unless they get Trevor Lawrence, they're not going to draft a guy who has Matthew Stafford's talent in this draft. Even at 33, they're not going to. This is one of the great quarterback talents of my lifetime. He's got Brett Favre kind of arm talent. So they're not going to get that. So if you're going to get a player like him, then I say go all in because with him, there's a lot of flaw. He's the kind of player with Kyle Shanahan that can mask a few roster flaws that might arise because you spent capital on getting him.
Yeah,
he masked roster flaws his entire career in Detroit, so
yeah,
he's used to that. And the other thing is people say that he's expensive. No, he's not. Right,
no.
Signing bonus that's prorated that Detroit is responsible for. He's going to have a 23 or $24 million cap hit next year. He's under contract for 2 years. He's still only 32. I know he has injury concerns, but he's tough as shit. He's playing through. I don't even know what he has.
Rib cartilage. So the ribs, think about that, right? A quarterback is playing through a rib injury. Think about that. And then the injury prone thing. What is it? 8 games in his last 3 years, something like that?
2011. Since 2011.
So 9 years. In 9 years, he's missed 8 games. That is the opposite of injury prone. Seriously.
Just to put the rib thing in perspective, just because he plays in Detroit, they don't get a lot of media attention, so his career will always be underrated and underheralded. If you remember in 2011, Niners lost week 2. Dante Whitner bit on play action, and Dwayne Harris was gone. Tony Romo hit him. Do you remember what Tony Romo played through in that game? That was the biggest national story of all time.
Punctured lung?
No, he played through a broken rib. It was like when Ronnie Lott cut off his finger and played. It was that big of a deal, Tony Romo. So that's what Matthew Stafford is playing through. It just hasn't been highlighted and addressed and covered the same way. But that just tells you how tough he is and just how willing he is to put himself out there at not 100% and still play well.
Right. Yeah. One more thing too is you heard Aaron Rodgers kind of when they started asking him. I believe he was because he does his weekly segment on his Pat McAfee show, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So I forget they Pat McAfee brought up no look passes and he's like, yeah, because Pat Mahomes was the only one that was ever doing that, right? He almost seemed annoyed by it. It's almost because we're so we endear Patrick Mahomes so much, it's almost like he invented the forward pass, right? But what I thought Aaron Rodgers said that was really was really cool was that he said Stafford's been doing that his entire career. He's like that's not something. He's like if you're gonna talk about who has the real no look pass, he's like and then. You guys saw it too this week. He threw that no look pass in Tennessee through a keyhole. That throw, I've watched it 85 times and I still have no idea how that ball was put exactly where it was supposed to go.
It's the Antonio Banderas gif,
and another name you just hit on. Is Aaron Rodgers an option or are we just gonna
he's an option. He's an option.
You think he's an option?
He's an option.
I know he's upset about the whole Jordan Love thing. They've got him sitting on the burner. He's got an out in his contract, I think, next season.
Yep, 2022.
He's from the Bay Area. He's from California, I guess. But
I mean, I would cry over Matthew Stafford, I might be balling over Aaron Rodgers.
Well, that's the guy, right? So if Aaron Rodgers has the best arm talent that I've probably seen since the guy named Mahomes, right? It's probably Stafford that's right there with them in that same discussion, man.
Yeah, Stafford is elite. He's elite. He's
It's
an elite
those
player.
two for me. It's those two, Mahomes, Josh Allen. Yeah, those would be the four for me.
Man, you hear those arms? All right, let's not get sad. So look, let's put a bow on it, right? So I think we covered a lot. Akash, thank you, man. Vish, thank you. Javi, thank you. So Akash, real quick, just plug everything that you're working on, and we'll go around so everybody could plug what they got going on.
Of course, man. First of all, I appreciate you for having me. It's always good, and I know it's less fun compared to last year. I literally got hit with like the memories from like Snapchat or whatever, and last year, I think this was the anniversary of the Rams Saturday night game where Jimmy Garoppolo had like 2 3rd and 16s, and they were like 12-3. It was an entirely different, emotion that you had last season compared to now, where you're talking about draft and quarterback and all this stuff. But appreciate you for having me. Obviously, you guys know Niners Nation podcast. I do that with Cal Posey, so that comes out every Wednesday. And you can follow me on Twitter at Akash Anavarathan. So thanks again, man.
Yeah, man, of course. Vish, what do you got?
Yeah, so first, Jason, thank you for having me. You're the man.
No, you're the man.
Meeting you. Javi, you're also the man. All three of you are the man for the man. But yeah, so I go on every Mondays with Grant. We usually have a show around 12:30 Pacific or 10:30 Pacific. We go on every Monday, kind of just rehash what's going on. And I talk to Grant and usually kind of bring him down after, because usually his post games are hyped up. And so we have a different type of conversation on Mondays. I also have my own YouTube channel with one of my buddies. It's called Blake and Vish Sports. Subscribe to that if you can. And then finally, follow me on Twitter at Vish Kumaran. My handle is right here. If you can, follow me.
Yep. Javi?
Yeah, of course, Jason, I appreciate you, homie, for having me on. And with these two guys, I mean, shit, I feel out of place. Vish be killing it. Kosh is killing it. But you can follow me on Twitter at @JaviVeg_. And then, of course, you guys know I work for Pro Football Network, so at PFN365. And then we do have the 4th and Goal podcast at 4th and Goal Pod. So check all that stuff out. I'm here for the dialogue. I'm not going to dunk on you like somebody else out there.
Well, I'm glad that we had to get that last one in too. So yeah, you guys follow me on Twitter at Jason Aponte, Sprint Right Option Pod, also on Twitter. Recording an emergency episode tonight because I think I called Andrew Jameis. I think Andrew wants to get on some Jameis theme because he's been catching some heat on Twitter tonight. So check us out tonight. Again, man, thank you guys all. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in. Make sure you follow all these guys. A lot of great content on there, man. And yeah, we'll talk to you later on during the week.
Merry Christmas, everybody.